Hi, this is Emerald and welcome to the Diamond Net, and today I'm going to be telling you a little bit about what enlightenment is not. Okay, so several weeks ago I made a video about what enlightenment is, and basically I just offered one perspective on enlightenment, and essentially enlightenment is something that can't really be described in words, but I'm going to go ahead and offer you another perspective on enlightenment, just from my personal experience with my enlightenment experiences that I had 6.5, 7 years ago. I had two, 5 months apart. It wasn't a permanent thing, but it was enough to give me kind of a glimpse of what non-duality consciousness is like. And so I'll go ahead and I'll share from my perspective then what it was. So basically, at that point in time, I had a really, really strong ego, and I didn't really label it as such. I had just a very definite sense of self, and, I was constantly trying to build that up, and I had certain rules that I had even set for myself around my personality that had become unconscious to me. But both times, I had this realization that, oh my goodness, I have been putting forth so much effort and so much work into a concept that isn't even me. I had conflated myself with a collection of thoughts. And so once I saw that I was not this collection of thoughts or this separate individual that I thought I was, I just felt deeply connected to everything in existence. And basically, because I had no longer had this false sense of self to protect, all of the protection mechanisms in my mind kind of melted away. So complexes and traumas, or I should say complexes caused by traumas, kind of just instantly fell away because they were no longer necessary. Because I realized that there was nothing there to protect. There was nothing there that I needed to resist. So it didn't matter what I thought of myself or what other people thought of me. And I didn't need to psychologically protect my ego anymore. And so everything that was me just came bubbling back up to the surface. I no longer ignored anything in my internal world. I just saw it as another phenomenon in nature. So, for example, if anger were to come up on a normal basis, maybe I might judge that anger and say, oh, I shouldn't be angry. But when I was having that experience, it was just complete acceptance. It was, oh, I'm angry and that's okay. It didn't mean anything about a separate individual named Emerald. So that was kind of my experience during both of those experiences, especially in the later one. A lot more stuff came up from my early childhood that I had repressed away. All right, so with that definition in mind, I'm going to go ahead and tell you what enlightenment is not. And I think that this is very, very helpful because enlightenment is basically not explainable through words. So the things that I tell you about enlightenment can never give you the experience of enlightenment. But if I tell you what enlightenment isn't, you can kind of empty your cup of assumptions about enlightenment, and that can help to kind of clear the path, and essentially then you can become ripe for the breakthrough called enlightenment. All right, so let's get on to my list of 10 things that enlightenment is not. I might make other videos like this because there are a ton of misconceptions surrounding enlightenment, but I'll go ahead and I'll start with number 1. All right, so the first thing enlightenment is not is gaining a lot of spiritual or esoteric knowledge. Like, you could literally read every holy book, every new age philosophy on the planet, and this will not yield you enlightenment. Now, that's not as to say that this isn't a helpful thing to do. Sometimes it can be helpful if you actually use it to empty your cup instead of fill your cup. Because basically, if you're clinging to any beliefs or dogmas, or you have a rigid way of looking at things, then enlightenment isn't likely to strike you, because the thing that you need most for enlightenment is openness, open-mindedness, and acceptance. And so if you just glom onto a particular religious doctrine or a particular New Age spiritual belief, or, whatever the belief might be, that's going to block the road for you from actually experiencing your true existential nature, which is what enlightenment is. Oh, and another thing to keep in mind in relation to this one is to not engage in spiritual bypassing. Basically that's where you start looking at spirituality, but then you start neglecting the basic everyday tasks and issues of life, and you kind of use spirituality sort of almost like an addiction and like a drug. So you want to absolutely go in the opposite direction of that, not only because it won't yield you enlightenment, but because it's very, very harmful for your life situation. All right, the second thing that enlightenment is not is having a spiritual ego. So it doesn't matter if you say namaste every time you talk to someone, or if you go to church every Sunday, or if you do any kind of spiritual type activity. That's really not what matters. In fact, somebody who's atheist could become enlightened. Someone who follows any religion can become enlightened. Ultimately, the main litmus test is going to be how open you can be and how accepting you can be, because it takes a radical degree of open-mindedness to realize your own enlightenment. So remember, a spiritual ego is still an ego. All right, the third thing enlightenment is it's not an achievement or goal. And this one really, really stumped me up after my enlightenment experiences, because prior to them, everything that I had always done was you set a goal and then you put forth willpower to achieve that goal. So essentially I thought, well, let me just will myself back to that state. And because enlightenment has a lot to do with surrender and acceptance, the more you will yourself to enlightenment, the more you're not going to get it. If you're grasping in any way, or if you have any preconceived notions, or if you're trying to get somewhere with it, you're not going to get anywhere with it. And so seeking enlightenment is quite paradoxical like that. Also, there was a tendency to, for a lot of people and myself, to think about enlightenment as an achievement, some kind of adornment for the ego itself. And so don't expect that in becoming enlightened that you're actually going to make yourself a more interesting person or a cooler person. It's really not about that. What it's about is it's about living your best life and realizing the truth of who you are. So there was a metaphor that I came up with for this one. Like, imagine that enlightenment is like a paper coming out of the printer, and you want it to hurry up and you want it to hurry up, and so you start tugging on the paper and you pull the paper out, and like the printer ink just smears all over the paper and it doesn't give you what you need. You have to understand that enlightenment just takes the proper conditions and time. So if those things are in place, you could be ripe for the breakthrough of enlightenment. All right, number 4, enlightenment is not a mystical experience. Now, in my experiences, they were certainly mystical experiences, but the most striking thing was just that I just saw things in a very, very sober kind of way. I was just seeing things truly as they were, and in that I was seeing the magic in things. So I think what I would more so be seeing is just this subtle knowing and understanding of how like things work together in nature, and just having really a subtler form of knowing, which would feel like heaven on earth, but wouldn't look any different to the naked eye. The fifth thing enlightenment is it's not an end in itself. So don't think that once you reach enlightenment, that's it, then you just get to retreat from life and your life is solved and never any practical issues will come up again, and that it'll be this idyllic situation. You're still going to have to deal with the same situations in life. The only thing that's different is going to be your internal experience of it. Chances are no one even is going to be able to tell that you're enlightened by looking at you, nor would most people even believe you, because most people don't subscribe to that train of thought. But what it is you are just able to very objectively look at your internal state and your emotions, and you just don't get hung up on particular ideas, and you don't make things mean anything about a separate sense of self. And so a lot of the negative thoughts and feelings that we have, which are basically all geared toward our self-concept, just kind of fall away. And so life becomes lighter, it becomes easier to deal with, and you're not always having to be the steward of this imaginary self-concept. All right, number 6. Enlightenment is not becoming a yogi, hermit, or ascetic. Now, of course, all of these are valid paths to take, and if that's what you feel like your path is, absolutely go for it. But if not, don't worry about it, because that is just one path for it. There are plenty of enlightened people who are just everyday people, that they go to the grocery store, they have a house, they have a family, they have a spouse. There's no need to actually take yourself out of life. Now, there's an argument could be that, you could reach enlightenment quicker and devote all your time to reaching enlightenment by, taking some time off of life. And that's true, because then you don't have anything to start respinning that self-concept around. So I would say that it's probably easier to retreat from life, but you don't have to. Essentially, any content can be going on in your field of awareness, and that doesn't really matter as long as you realize that you're the container for that content and not anything in the content itself. All right, number 7, enlightenment is not becoming uninterested in all worldly goals. Now, this was one that I really messed up with after my experiences, because prior to my experiences, worldly goals were the thing that was driving me forward. And I was quite successful in high school and in college, and I had a lot of big dreams at the time, and a lot of them were negatively motivated. I can see now that was motivated by me basically trying to outrun the Reaper by creating myself as more significant. So I was constantly trying to add significance to my self-concept with many of my worldly goals. Now, when I had those experiences, it became very, very clear to me that I was suffering for no reason. I was running on a hamster wheel. And so after my enlightenment experiences, what happened is I went back to life trying to get back to that same state of being. And so I started to repress that worldly, striving, achievement-oriented nature of mine. And it didn't do much for me, because it was basically me repressing my ego as opposed to transcending my ego. Now, of course, all worldly goals don't go away, but you do them for a different reason. You don't do them for fame or for glory or to add adornment to your ego. And basically all things that you've been pursuing for that reason will just naturally fall away with no emotional issues. It'll just go away. You'll be completely uninterested in it. But things that are genuine to you, things that are natural to you, will stay in your life if you want them to stay in your life. So for example, I wanted to make it big as a painter after I died one day. That was my big goal. I wouldn't even be around to enjoy my fame. But basically, I still enjoy painting, but I don't hold the goal of being a famous painter and making my life significant through being a famous painter. So the painting stays, but all of that extra stuff falls away. Number 8. Enlightenment is not getting rid of your emotions. So during my second experience, I actually had quite a lot of emotions come up, and because I was allowing my emotions and because I didn't make my emotions mean anything about a self-concept, my emotions were able to play themselves out at full stretch, which I really wasn't capable of doing before, and I'm still not capable of doing now. Even now, I notice that I keep a cap on my emotions. I don't want them to get out of control. But I was completely non-resistant to what my emotions were doing, and so it was almost as though my emotions were playing some kind of beautiful symphony inside of me, or were a work of art in themselves, just playing their way out through my body. And it wasn't as though they were all happy emotions. During that experience, I felt happy, I felt ecstasy, and close to, like a sexual excitement type of thing. And then I also felt sadness and I felt anger. And in relation to the sadness aspect, it was just, I was able to pick up on so many different subtle things that I normally wouldn't pick up on. So I was actually at a party during the second experience, and I was kind of like, there was maybe 10 to 15 people. It was like a college party. And these guys who owned the house that I was at, or rented the house that I was at, I should say, they had this cute little puggle, which is half pug, half beagle. And like the whole time I had known them, they basically, would talk to the dog, and they would like make the dog's voice up, and like they had this whole personality mapped out for this dog, and it was a cute thing. You do that to dogs and cats and kids a lot of times. You give them a silly voice, and this and that and the other. And I was having the enlightenment experience. I was seeing this, and I suddenly got really deeply, deeply sad watching them do this with this dog. And it sounds a little bit silly, but kind of hear me out. Like, I wasn't sad for the dog. Like, the dog was fine, the dog was happy. But I realized that they were delusional. Like, now, if I would have asked them, hey, that's not really that dog's personality, they would have said, of course, that's not the dog's personality. But on a deep level, they believed that what they projected upon that dog was the dog's real personality. So I was kind of sad for them. But then I was able to see that as relating to every single human interaction, and realizing that this is how parents interact with their children, and this is how husbands and wives interact with one another, and realizing that the way human beings generally go about relationships is they use another person for a projection screen in which to display their love, hopes, dreams, and fears. And so everybody's deeply alone for that reason, and just this deep sorrow washed over me. And so the enlightenment experience that I had was overwhelmingly positive, and the most beautiful experience that I had ever had, truthfully, the second one especially. And basically, those emotions came through me very quickly. So this emotion didn't keep me depressed for a long period of time. It was just there for a few seconds so that I could get the information that it was trying to convey to me and get the wisdom from it, like of actually seeing how this played out in reality. But that's how long it stayed around for. It only stayed around long enough so that I could get the wisdom from the emotion. Number 9, enlightenment is not moral perfection. So during my second enlightenment experiences, which was the one that I had a lot more insights pop up during, basically, because I no longer had my thoughts mean anything about me as an individual, basically all thoughts were able to come up. And what I noticed right away is that I didn't have only positive thoughts. Now, very much so, before my experiences and after, I have a very strong identification as a good person. Like, I think it would probably be the worst way for me to feel if I perceive myself as a bad person, or people perceive me as a bad person. And so because of this strong identification with goodness, there was so many things in my mind that I had invalidated and didn't allow to be there. So basically, what was happening is I kind of was able to zoom myself out from my thoughts, and I noticed that I had these two warring groups of thoughts, like that were really like almost having a chemical reaction with one another. Like there were all these good thoughts, and the sentiments in the good thoughts pile were all these compassionate thoughts of, oh, I want to help others, I want to make things good for others, this and that. But then I had this whole entire other side that I did not know even existed, because I had completely drowned that out, that I would deem them to be evil thoughts. And the one that pops out to me the most, and it was a really strong visual image that kind of stuck with me for an extended period of time, is I had this almost like very dark fantasy of shoving my thumbs deep in the eye sockets of this person that I actually really cared about and admired. And so on a normal basis, if a thought like this were to pop up to me like right now, like that would be a serious that would be a serious issue for me. I'd be like, oh my God, am I this bad, sick person? Oh my goodness. But because I was out of my thoughts, and because I could just look upon them like I would look upon any other phenomenon in nature, like I could look upon them like I would look at a sunset or like a thunderstorm and make them not mean anything about me, I was able to accept the fact that these thoughts were there, and I was able to watch them. And so basically, before, I was living in the good person thought pile. And so because I was inside of the good person thought pile, and that was where I had resided, I was unable to see the other parts of things going on in my mind. And watching the chaos go between that good side and that bad side, it was a really beautiful phenomenon when I watched it like that. Now, of course, I would never act on any of those thoughts, and nor did I have the urge to act on them. I was just literally able to observe them. However, I've heard different stories of people who are enlightened or were enlightened or claim to be enlightened, where they've done less than ethical actions. Different scenarios where like there have been enlightened people who molested people and, all kinds of other things like that. And the only thing I could wager is that they were still conflating themselves with the voice, only they had decided to give in to that negative voice. That's the only thing that I could figure, because I couldn't at the time see myself siding with really either one of those thoughts in that particular moment. I realized that it was just two, a good monkey and a bad monkey chattering at each other, and I could watch it. But deep underneath that good and bad thought, there was this other deeper form of knowing and deeper form of wisdom, and that would be the thing that I would follow. And because when you are having an ego transcendence experience or an enlightenment experience, you realize that there's no delineation between yourself as a separate being and every other thing in existence. And so essentially your self-concept gets expanded to encompass all of existence. And so you can have compassion for things that you right now don't have the capacity to have compassion for. So at the time I was able to have like a deep feeling of compassion toward everything, and I couldn't see myself go out of my way to purposefully hurt something. I could only see myself really go in the direction of helping someone, despite the fact that those very negative, evil thoughts were there. The only thing that I could figure is that if somebody was enlightened and decided to go with the negative thoughts, that they just made a really poor decision on purpose and didn't see the distinction between themselves and the negative thoughts, and weren't listening to that deeper voice of wisdom. So that's the only thing I could figure. And finally, number 10, enlightenment is not getting rid of your individuality. Now, one caveat that I'll mention is that if you have inauthentic things or things that you've tacked on to yourself that you think make you an individual, like if you have, let's say, a particular social group that you associate yourself with and you think that's part of your self-concept, or if you dress a particular way and you think that's part of your self-concept and that's what makes you interesting or significant, those type of things will drop away. Whatever is inauthentic will drop away. But every single person, just like everything in nature, has nuances and has individuality just naturally baked into them. Like if you go outside and you look at the daisies in your backyard, you're going to notice that all of those daisies are different from one another, even though they're all the same species of plant. And the same way goes with human beings. You're going to keep whatever nuances are most natural to you. But if you have extra things tacked on to you and extra concepts, those things are going to fall away. But again, you're not going to mind that they fall away because you'll see through the illusion. So it'll feel good. It'll feel like a load off to get rid of those aspects of yourself that you've come to know as individuality, but were really coping mechanisms in order to protect the false ego. So prior to my enlightenment experiences, I had a very, very strong identification with my self-concept. And I had built up a really interesting, certainly very interesting self-concept. And one aspect of it was my style of dress. And, you know, I really did appreciate the style of dress, and I still do. It was more, like, for want of a better word, sort of gothy, and I still really appreciate it aesthetically. But what I had noticed is that I began to build a self-concept around that. And some things in my personality were actually not authentic because I was trying to paint in the lines of what that meant. And I didn't even see it. Like, I had even thought at that point, oh, you know, I'm just being really unique by going outside of the lines from what the typical goth person would be like. But I realized that even still, it still came with a lot of inauthentic stuff. And so after that, it wasn't like I stopped dressing that way because I still enjoyed it, but all of the concepts and rules that I had created for myself around that identity completely fell away. So you're not going to get rid of your individuality, at least not the authentic individual things that are mostly put there through physiology and just through life circumstance. What you're going to do is you're just going to say, hey, what's working for me, what's not, and all the things that aren't working for you, you just let go of. You know, enjoy what you enjoy, but sometimes we think that we enjoy things when we really only enjoy them being part of our self-concept. All right, so those are 10 things among many that enlightenment is not, and I hope that this was kind of cleared up some misconceptions or, you know, helped you see a little bit more about what enlightenment is. Hopefully it helps you empty your cup of assumptions. If you enjoyed this video, go ahead and click the like button below and go ahead and subscribe to my channel. I have more videos relating to enlightenment coming up. Also, it's kind of a Heinz 57 channel, you know, there's psychological concepts, things from alchemy, Jungian psychology. If you enjoy any of those type of things, you'll definitely want to subscribe. But that's all I have for you today, and until next time, keep becoming more you.